What if your spiritual awakening didn't look like anyone else's? What if the signs weren't loud, mystical, or dramatic, but subtle, silent, and hidden in plain sight? Maybe you didn't have visions or hear voices. Maybe you simply started seeing through things. Like the way someone smiles without joy, or how a familiar place suddenly felt unfamiliar. This isn't for everyone. This is for the ones who feel something inside has quietly shifted. No fireworks, no announcements, just a soft inner knowing that refuses to be denied. You didn't plan it. You didn't chase it. It came like a tide, gentle, powerful, unstoppable, and you surrendered because something deeper inside whispered, "This is it." If this video feels familiar, not just interesting, you're not just spiritually aware. You may be one of the most spiritually awakened souls alive right now, not because you try harder, but because you feel deeper, see quieter, know without needing to prove. You've become the silence between the noise. And if some part of you hears this and says, "Yes, yeah, that's me," then this isn't just a video, it's a mirror, a remembering, a reunion. Section 1. Awakening beyond appearances. Awakening doesn't always arrive like thunder. It doesn't always come with visions, voices, or cosmic downloads that shatter the sky. Sometimes it's far quieter than you imagined, and far more real. The truth is, many of the most awakened souls you'll ever meet don't look extraordinary. They aren't performing miracles. They're folding laundry with presence. They're listening without interrupting. They're living like poetry that never has to rhyme. Real awakening doesn't announce itself. It comes through 1,000 barely noticed moments that slowly crack the surface of who you thought you were. Not one grand explosion, but a gentle erosion. Kind, constant, sacred. It shows up when you find yourself breathing deeper without effort. When your reactions slow down, not because you're trying to be spiritual, but because you're no longer playing the same inner game. It happens when you start hearing people, not just their words, but the spaces between them. You feel their sorrow, their longing, their masks, without judging, just noticing, like a tuning fork sensing vibration. You walk into the same room you've walked into 100 times, but this time, the light feels different. The silence carries meaning. Even the floor beneath your feet seems to greet you. You might be sipping tea one morning and suddenly feel like you're not who you were yesterday. No crisis, no ceremony, just a soft shift, like the soul took one more breath into the body. It's these kinds of moments, simple, sacred, unspoken, that whisper, "You're no longer asleep." Section 2. The energetic truth beneath words. There comes a moment on this path where language stops being just words and becomes energy. You no longer hear what people say, you feel it. You feel where it's coming from. You hear the compliment, but your chest tightens, you sense the apology, but your gut whispers, something's missing. The voice sounds calm, but the air feels thick. You're not trying to analyze, you're not trying to judge, you just know. You sense the subtle disharmony before it's spoken. It's not magic, it's presence, it's clarity. It's like tuning into the radio frequency of emotion. The mouth might say, "I'm fine," but the body says, "I'm tired of holding this in," and your own energy listens more than your ears ever did. This isn't about calling people out. This isn't about confrontation. It's not about proving someone's truth is false. It's about knowing when to soften, when to step back, when to simply hold space. You realize that communication was never just about exchanging words. It's always been about resonance, and your body has become a tuning fork for what the soul is actually saying. A friend apologizes, but something feels off. You smile, you nod, but inside something stirs. Your heart knows. That wasn't peace, it was guilt looking for relief. And you don't resent them. You just see clearly. Over time, you stop needing explanations. You trust your sensing. You bow to the wisdom of what's felt beneath the surface. This is not judgment. This is discernment. This is soul-level hearing. Section 3. Micro-flashbacks from other versions of you. Sometimes when the world is quiet and your guard is down, something stirs. Not in the mind, but in the heart. It's not a memory exactly. It's an emotion that doesn't belong to the present moment yet arrives as if it never left. You're sipping coffee or walking through a park, and suddenly, out of nowhere, you feel the exact sadness you had at 6 years old, sitting alone after being misunderstood. No image, just the ache. These aren't just emotional triggers. They're echoes, soul imprints, fragments of forgotten selves surfacing not to haunt you, but to finally be held. A piece of you that was silenced decades ago just wants you to say, I see you, I hear you, I'm still here. You don't need to name it, you don't need to dissect it. Just feel it move through like weather. Honor it, breathe with it, soften around it. Let it go without pushing it away. Sometimes it feels like grief with no story, joy with no source, nostalgia with no picture, and that's okay. You're feeling the echoes of a self you've outgrown but never abandoned. Integration isn't loud. It doesn't happen through logic. It happens through permission. The permission to feel without explanation. One day, you're walking, you suddenly feel the warmth of entering your grandmother's house as a child. You can't recall the furniture, but the feeling is vivid. That's not just nostalgia, it's a soul retrieval. You're not regressing, you're reconnecting. These waves are not signs of weakness, they are signs of wholeness making its way home. Section 4. Sacred stillness and inner silence. There comes a moment, not out of effort but grace, when the voice inside your head begins to quiet, not because you silenced it, but because it no longer has anything urgent to say. Silence doesn't come from control. It arises like mist in the early morning, from freedom, from release, from the absence of inner resistance. You stop narrating your life. You're no longer the storyteller, just the presence behind the story, living each moment without needing to label it. In that stillness, you begin to hear what you never could before: the hum of light, the rhythm of your own breath, the quiet exhale of the world itself. Every sense becomes heightened, not in a dramatic way, but in a tender, sacred way. You feel the grain of wood under your fingers, the flicker of sunlight through the blinds, the echo of space between things. And it's not detachment, it's not drifting away. It's arriving, fully, finally, into the body you once escaped through thought. This isn't numbness. It's the opposite. It's feeling so much, so purely, that the mind bows in reverence and lets the body lead. You begin to realize that silence is not the absence of thought. It's the space where awareness expands beyond thought. Stillness is no longer something you chase. It becomes your home, your natural rhythm. You don't need to try to be present. You simply are. And in that quiet, something ancient awakens. The knowing that you were never broken, only busy, only distracted. Section 5. Boundaried compassion. There comes a point on the path where compassion matures, from rushing in to rescue to simply standing in sacred witness. You no longer mistake urgency for love or guilt for care. You begin to discern, deeply, intuitively, when offering help brings healing and when it robs someone of their own transformation. What used to feel like kindness now sometimes feels like interference. What used to be called saving is recognized as delaying their sacred becoming. You hear someone in pain. The old you would have rushed in, carrying solutions, advice, energy. You wanted to ease their suffering because their pain triggered your own, but the awakened you pauses. You breathe, you feel deeper. You recognize the weight in their voice is their rite of passage, not your burden to carry. You don't turn away. You stay, but you stay differently. Your presence becomes a soft lantern, not a lifeboat. This is not detachment. It's reverence. It's trust in their soul's timing. You understand that sometimes the greatest act of love is not to fix, but to witness silently with unwavering faith in their inner strength. And so, you become a space, not a solution, a mirror, not a manual, a presence that says, I see you, I trust you, even in your darkest hour. This is the heart's new posture, not leaning in to control, but opening wide to hold. Not meddling, but ministering. Not saving, but sanctifying. Section 6. Sensitivity to energy and overstimulation. There comes a quiet shift, almost unnoticed, where your nervous system no longer craves stimulation, but harmony. You begin to feel the sharp edges of places you once moved through without a second thought. Noisy cafes, bright stores, endless chatter. It's not anxiety, it's not weakness, it's not social fatigue. It's your system saying, I can no longer thrive in frequencies that don't match my truth. You used to love them all. The music, the people, the endless choices. But lately, just stepping through those glass doors makes your chest tighten and your breath grow shallow. Your senses are no longer dull to the dissonance. They've become tuned, refined, sharp like the ear of a violinist who can hear the single note that's out of place. This isn't fragility, it's sacred refinement. Your body is no longer numbing itself to survive. It's learning to feel, again, truly feel without filters. You don't retreat because you're broken. You retreat because you're whole. And your wholeness rejects environments that fracture your spirit. You start choosing silence over noise, solitude over overstimulation, earth tones over artificial brightness. You no longer ask, what's wrong with me? Instead, you whisper, what do I need to return to balance? You begin to seek spaces that don't just distract you, but restore you, that don't just entertain your senses, but soothe your soul. A quiet corner with a breeze, a morning without talking, a walk without music. You find joy not in more, but in less, in presence, in peace. And in that simplicity, your entire being exhales. You realize your sensitivity is not a curse. It's your compass. It's your wisdom. It's your soul, remembering how to live. Section 7. Letting go of timelines and comparison. There comes a moment on this journey where you stop measuring your life by the clocks of others. You stop comparing your path to theirs, not because you've given up, but because you've finally come home to your own rhythm. There is a sacred relief in not needing to catch up, in watching someone else's highlight reel and feeling no pressure to compete. The timeline you used to chase fades like mist, and in its place, stillness, spaciousness, a knowing that your soul is right on time. You no longer rush, not because you've stopped caring, but because you've started trusting. You trust that your expansion cannot be late, your joy cannot be missed, your purpose cannot forget you. You realize that behind and ahead are illusions. Concepts born from minds trying to race the infinite. Instead of asking, why am I not there yet? You start whispering, what is life trying to show me here? There's a beauty in delay, in detour, in pausing long enough to feel the texture of your life. Some doors don't open because they aren't yours. Some arrivals are delayed because they are sacred, and what once felt like stagnation becomes sanctuary. What once felt like failure becomes foundation. You're no longer in a rush to become, because you've remembered, you already are. Section 8. Morning emotions as spiritual downloads. You open your eyes, and before a single thought has formed, you feel it. A heaviness, or a tenderness, or a strange ache that has no story, no reason, no obvious origin. It isn't your personal sadness. It isn't yesterday's worry. It's something older, vaster, something that arrived in the quiet hours while you slept. Your body, your energy field, your soul, they're acting like a tuning fork for something collective, something ancestral, something planetary. And while others may wake and say, I don't know why I feel like this, you wake and say, I do, because you've come to understand that these aren't mood swings. They are spiritual updates. They're like emotional software upgrades, clearing, recalibrating, restoring things you can't always name. You don't try to fight the feeling or reframe it into positivity. You meet it like a guest, a visitor, a teacher. Some mornings carry the grief of a forgotten people. Some carry the fear of a world in transition. Some bring the peace of a prayer whispered long ago. And in those moments, you don't analyze, you don't suppress. You become a sanctuary for what the world is too busy to feel. Most people wake up and suppress. You wake up and listen. This isn't weakness. This is sensitivity as service, presence as healing. And the more you honor these morning visitations, the more your soul opens to its role, not as an absorber, but as a transformer of collective truth. Section 9. Discernment of inherited thoughts. There comes a moment on this path when you start hearing your thoughts differently. Not all of them sound like you. Not all of them feel like you. And that's the beginning of awakening. Some thoughts arrive carrying the weight of generations. The shame of an ancestor, the fear of a parent, the guilt of a culture that forgot how to love. And you don't resist them. You don't battle them. You simply breathe and feel the difference. You notice the sharpness of one thought, the heaviness of another, and you gently ask, where did you come from? That's discernment, not rejection, not suppression, just a deep, subtle knowing. This isn't mine. You begin to realize that so many of the thoughts you've lived with weren't born in your soul. They were handed to you, and one day, you hear that old voice, you're not enough. And something inside pauses, not to fight, but to ask, whose voice is this really? You don't need to dissect it. You don't need to rewrite it. You just choose not to carry it anymore. This is spiritual sovereignty, the quiet power of no longer letting every thought own you. You are not your thoughts. You are the space behind them, the still witness, the deep riverbed beneath the waves, and from that place your mind begins to soften, not silenced, but seen, not controlled, but loved. You become a tuning fork for truth, and let all else dissolve into silence. Spiritual awakening rarely announces itself with fireworks. It's quiet, it's deep, it moves like wind beneath the surface of water. You feel more, you think less. Not because you're lost, but because you've come home to something wordless. You know more. You speak less. Because truth doesn't always need language. It just needs presence. You stop chasing the light because you begin to realize you are the light. Always were. Just forgotten. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're awakening at a depth that most people never recognize because it doesn't look like anything loud. And if this message resonates, not just in your ears but in your chest, then you're part of something rare, something real. We're building a space for that. For you, not for likes, not for followers, but for belonging, for remembrance, for the ones done pretending. So if your soul is quietly saying yes, subscribe. Not because you're supposed to, but because you're ready to come home to something. True souls like yours don't just watch, they lead, not loudly, but with every breath, every presence, every choice to stay awake in a sleeping world. And if you're still here, still listening, this space was made for you. Before you leave, pause, breathe. Let this be more than a video. Let it be a mirror, a portal, a remembering. So ask yourself gently, which sign whispered to your soul today? When did you first notice your awakening didn't look like anyone else's? What spaces nourish you now? When noise no longer feeds you? This isn't just about answers. It's about honoring the questions that shape your becoming. Thank you for remembering who you are, for listening with your heart, for being light in a loud world.